Welcome to my channel. Today, a step-by-step tutorial that's perfect for beginners. I'll be showcasing 3 different ways to use stencils. This page started with a page that I broke by smooshing. I'll put a link to the break the page video where I did it. Here is the broken page with those bright, vivid colors. I absolutely loved the background. I love the white space. And sometimes that's the problem because you don't know what you want to do with it. So I decided I'm going to use this stencil with these words, and I'm going to put all these words on here, not as the sentiment, but as background detail. And I'm using black paint because I want to build contrast in. Now, I'm using words in this way as details in the background, as pattern, but I'm also wishing this for all of you. All these words. You could collage down words from sentiments, from stamps, and some of that will peek through in the end, but the gift, if you did this on a card, goes to that person. Now, you'll notice that I have the word, I put create, but it comes out 8. Try to avoid having partial words. Now, this time, I really didn't have any idea about focal image or anything else. I was just building in contrast and hoping that this step leads to the next step. I'm loving the contrast. I'm loving the words, and I will use these words um, as a sentiment at some later time. It's a perfect sentiment. This is the 6-inch stencil. I'll list this and any of the other stencils in the description box. Here's a sneak peek of the finish, and at the end, I'm going to review using my art journal prompt and process cards that you can purchase at Ninny's Napkins. So now I want to knock back some of this. I don't really want to be reading or have the words up front. So I'm using this Tile Mania stencil with white paint. So I've used black and I'm using white. This is just kind of pushing back the letters in the words, covering up some of the color, adding very subtle patterning. Didn't like how that looks, so I'm wiping it off quickly. Now I can do that because everything underneath is acrylic paint. It's permanent. So it's not going to move if I wipe it. It also gives me that opportunity to correct a mistake. So if you're a beginner and you're struggling with mediums that are water activated, try just using acrylic paint for now. Eliminate that one problem and build some success. You can always add them in. Then I have this star stencil. This is a slimline stencil from the Crafter's Workshop, and I'm using black. I'm focused on the word dream. It's in the mat in the middle, imagine. So I'm thinking at this point, I might be going somewhere there, and the stars seem to fit. I'm using black acrylic paint and a makeup sponge. And I stamp off so that when I look at the sponge, it doesn't look wet. And that's the secret to stenciling. So here we've used the stencil to put the words on, to put some patterning on, and we're using just black and white paint. I've got black paint on my makeup sponge, so I'm edging the page here with black. That's framing it. And I often do this in the middle. I might come back and add more at the end, but I just want to frame my page. And sometimes that helps me figure out what the next step is. You don't need to know every step. So here I'm using this stencil as was the border, and I'm using black paint and I'm going around. I just wanted to beef up the border a little bit more. So look at your stencils. You can mask off, as I have, part of the stencil and use part of it to create funky borders. I just keep moving that stencil across the page. So we've used stencils for patterning and for the background. We're using stencils to create the border. So even if purple and blue aren't your color scheme, and I believe this was turquoise and violet paint. Loving this. So now I've decided that because I focus on the word dream, I went to my sentiment pack and now I'm bubble cutting around the script. I'm leaving a little bit of white because, again, I wanted to stand off. This is a busy background, so I wanted to stand out. So this says, let your dreams be your wings. And of course, I'm going to go with something with wings. So it could be a bird, it could be a butterfly, it could be a dragonfly, and all of these are readily accessible. There are lots of stamps, there are lots of magazine pictures that you could use for that. And I chose that because I know that they're readily accessible. And when you're a beginner, you don't have a complete stash. Now, this butterfly, I will be showing you how I created it, but this was in my stash. I had tried it out for some other page and it was there. And I just noticed that the colors really worked well with the background. Happy accident. And I could have just glued this one down, but I'm going to remake this in a minute and show you the stencil technique that I use to create this focal image. So just take a piece of copy paper. You can use mixed media paper or tagboard and put a coat of black acrylic paint. Now this technique is either to keep bright and bold on a black background, or I also call this reversing the stencil technique. So I'm using this stencil. It's called Dragonfly Collage. And I'm going to use that butterfly. I absolutely love the dragonfly on it or the butterfly, but the butterfly works better. Making sure it fits. Now, the first step after you have your black background is to put a coat of white gesso through the stencil. Now, you really want to make sure that your stencil doesn't move here. You can tape it down to give stability if you run into difficulties. And I'm putting gesso on. And I might put a couple layers. I want this fairly opaque. The more opaque you get, the brighter your bold colors are going to be. If you have variation, you're going to have variation on the colors. Now, make sure this dries. Now, to make success easier, don't remove the stencil. Just let it dry completely. Then you're going to go over it with the colors. And I apologize, camera glitched. But I'm basically putting the colors on and blending them as I put it through the stencil. I did not remove the stencil and I did not use a heat tool through the stencil. And you can see how those colors just really, really pop. Off that black. Now, once this is dry, I'm going to cut it. And I chose to leave a fairly substantial black border around. Now, the reason for that is I want this focal image to stand off from the background. And remember our background, it's fairly busy. There's a lot going on. So I'm leaving the black on. If that wasn't the case, you can cut a little bit closer. I do change the color on the wings a little bit just to fit my final picture. And I want to cover up most of those words. So that's what I'm with my focal image. I want to hint at them, but I don't want to have them compete with my sentiment. Once I have everything figured out, I'm putting a coat of fluid matte medium underneath and then on top to glue down both the sentiment and the focal image. If you don't like the deep violet and the turquoise combination, this same technique of using black and white to add contrast can be used for any color combination you want. Change your focal image to match the colors in your background. Use the same colors for your focal image as what you have in the background like I did here, or go with complementary colors. That will pop. I wanted the butterfly to stand out a little bit more, so I'm shading around the butterfly using my shading technique with my angle brush, and I'm building that up. You could use a Stabilo All pencil for this or a charcoal pencil, but both of those are not permanent. So don't add water to them afterwards because they will reactivate. So if you wanted to varnish it, that may be a problem. You may need to use a spray varnish. This is giving some shadow, and it really makes this focal image stand out. I'm adding some shading around the sentiment as well. And again, this is so that it stands out from my busy background. You can see here that most of the words aren't showing up. They're just pattern. So if you have a word stencil, think about using it that way. Alphabet stencil, number stencil, it's just another pattern. I'm adding some shading on top of the butterfly as well, and then I'm adding some highlights with white. Loving the page, and there is the finished page. So this page started with smooshing turquoise and deep violet onto a white gessoed surface. I stenciled to create pattern. I used some word stamps. I used the Tile Mania stamp or stencil, sorry, and the stars. And I'm adding contrast by using just black and white. I've already got color, so I'm adding black or white, and that really livened up the page. I edged the page with black, but then I came back and I created a border using my stencil. And again, I used black. Then I created my focal image by stenciling onto paper. In this case, I used the reverse the stencil technique to do the butterfly. I added the sentiment, I shaded and highlighted, and there we have it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Give me a thumbs up. Please share with your creative friends. Until next time, go get creative.